You're standing in the desert. It's 2580 BC. The sun is beating down on your back hard enough that you can feel your skin cooking in real time. There's no crane, there's no hydraulic lift. There's no foreman with a clipboard screaming about OSHA violations. There's just you, 20,000 other people, several million tons of limestone, and a pharaoh who wants his tomb so big that people 4,000 years in the future will still be losing their minds trying to figure out how you did it. And somehow, against every logical assumption your modern brain wants to make, you're going to pull it off. This is the story of how ancient Egypt built the pyramids. Not with alien technology, not with lost advanced civilizations, not with secrets that have been mysteriously erased from history. We're talking about the actual, documented, archaeological evidence of how human beings, using nothing but copper tools, wooden sledges, their own backs, and an absolutely terrifying amount of organizational genius, built some of the most precise megastructures in human history. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. We actually know how they did it. Or at least, we know enough that the mystery isn't how is this physically possible, but rather, how did they get this good at it? The pyramids aren't evidence of lost technology. They're evidence of what humans can accomplish when you combine mathematics, logistics, generational knowledge, and a culture that treats engineering the way modern Silicon Valley treats apps. With obsession, infinite iteration, and the absolute certainty that failure is not an option. Let's start with what we're actually talking about. Because when most people say the pyramids, they mean one pyramid. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu around 2580 BC. It's the last remaining wonder of the ancient world, and for good reason. It's made of approximately 2.3 million limestone blocks, each weighing on average 2.5 tons. Some of the granite blocks in the interior chambers weigh up to 80 tons. The base covers 13 acres. It was the tallest human-made structure on Earth for 3,800 years, until Lincoln Cathedral was completed in 1311 AD. Let that sink in. 30,800 years of holding the record. And here's the part that should make your engineering brain short-circuit. The base is level to within 2.1 centimeters across 230 meters. The sides are aligned to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, with an accuracy of 3/60th of a single degree. This isn't just big. This is precisely, obsessively, almost impossibly accurate for people working with copper chisels and no lasers. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Great Pyramid wasn't the first pyramid. It wasn't even the first successful pyramid. It was the result of roughly a century of trial, error, catastrophic failure, and incremental improvement that would make any modern startup founder weep with recognition. The Egyptians didn't just wake up one morning and nail it. They failed, repeatedly, publicly, expensively. The first attempt at a true pyramid was the Pyramid of Meidum, started around 2600 BC. It collapsed. Partially, catastrophically. In a way that left a giant pile of rubble that you can still visit today if you want to see what we miscalculated the structural integrity looks like at monumental scale. Then came the bent pyramid at Dashur, which starts at one angle and then abruptly changes halfway up, because the architects realized mid-construction that their original angle was going to cause the whole thing to collapse inward. So they just changed the angle. Partway through, the bent pyramid is basically ancient Egypt's version of, oh shit, pivot now. And then after learning from those mistakes, after refining the mathematics and the techniques and the organizational systems, they built the Great Pyramid. Not on the first try. After decades of expensive, highly visible failures, the Great Pyramid is what happens when a civilization treats pyramid construction the way SpaceX treats rockets. Iterate. Fail publicly. Learn. Build better. So how did they actually do it? Let's talk about the parts we know for certain. And then we'll get into the parts that are still educated arguments between very smart people who've devoted their entire lives to this question. First, the stone. You can't build a pyramid without stone, and you need a lot of it. The core of the Great Pyramid is made of local limestone quarried from the Giza Plateau itself. You can still see the quarry sites. They're right there, a few hundred meters from the pyramid. For the outer casing, the smooth white limestone that once covered the entire structure and made it gleam like a geometric sun in the desert, that came from Tura across the Nile, about 13 kilometers downstream. The granite used in the king's chamber and other interior structures came from Aswan, 800 kilometers to the south. We know this because archaeologists have matched the stone to the quarries using geological analysis. We also know how they quarried it, because they left the evidence behind. At Aswan, there's an unfinished obelisk, still partially attached to the bedrock, where you can see exactly what happened. Workers would hammer wooden wedges into natural cracks in the granite, then soak the wedges with water. The wood expands, the crack widens. Repeat until the stone breaks free. For limestone, which is softer, they used copper chisels and saws, along with dolerite hammerstones, a harder rock used to pound the copper tools deeper. It's slow, it's labor-intensive. It absolutely works. The tools themselves have been found, thousands of them. Copper chisels worn down to nubs, dolerite pounders with impact marks. We've even found ancient copper saws with traces of quartz sand embedded in the blade marks, suggesting they used sand as an abrasive to cut through harder stone. Not a mystery, not an alien tech. Copper, sand, and absolutely relentless patience. Now comes the part that blows people's minds. How do you move a 2.5-ton block of limestone, let alone an 80-ton granite monolith, without wheels, without pulleys as we know them, and without any machinery more complex than a wooden sledge? The answer, as it turns out, is water, sand, and more people than you think is reasonable. In 2014, a team of physicists from the University of Amsterdam did something wonderfully practical. They tested a theory based on a tomb painting from the reign of Jehoshaphat around 1900 BC, which shows a large statue being pulled on a sledge while a worker at the front pours liquid onto the sand in front of it. For years, people assumed this was ceremonial. Turns out it was engineering. When you pour the right amount of water onto sand, you reduce the friction by up to 50%. The sand firms up just enough to create a slick surface. The sledge glides instead of dragging. The Amsterdam team proved you could move a multi-ton block with half the force if you kept the sand in front of the sledge properly wet. Suddenly, what seemed impossible becomes a matter of coordination. You don't need magic. You need water discipline and enough people pulling in rhythm. The ancient Egyptians were very, very good at rhythm. We know this because we have their organizational records, papyrus fragments detailing work crews, ration distributions, shift rotations. The workers weren't slaves, by the way. That's a myth we can fully put to rest. The laborers were paid Egyptian citizens, organized into teams with names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure, which is the most humanizing detail in this entire story. Imagine being on the Drunkards team. Imagine the team pride. The trash talk with the Friends team. History is sometimes beautiful in the most absurd ways. Archaeologist Mark Leaner excavated a workers' village at Giza called Hayt el Garab. He found barracks, bakeries, breweries, and evidence of medical care, including healed broken bones, which means injured workers were being treated and kept alive, not discarded. The workers ate well, better than the average Egyptian. Beef, fish, bread in massive quantities. We have the animal bones to prove it. Thousands of cattle were slaughtered to feed the workforce. This wasn't slave labor. This was a national project with state-level logistical support. Think NASA in the 1960s, but with more bread and fewer computers. Let's talk about ramps, because this is where the real debate lives among Egyptologists. Everyone agrees ramps were used. The question is, what kind? An external ramp wrapping around the pyramid makes sense for the lower levels, but the higher you go, the longer and more massive the ramp would need to be. By the time you reach the top of the Great Pyramid at 146 meters, you'd need a ramp over 1 kilometer long just to maintain a reasonable incline. That's more material than the pyramid itself. Possible, but wildly inefficient. Enter Jean-Pierre Houdin, a French architect who spent years developing the internal ramp theory. Using 3D modeling and architectural analysis, Houdin proposed that the Egyptians built an external ramp for the first third of the pyramid, then switched to a spiral ramp inside the structure itself, just beneath the outer casing blocks. In 2017, scientists using muon radiography, a technique that detects density variations in structures by measuring cosmic ray particles, found evidence of a large void and what might be a corridor spiraling upward inside the Great Pyramid, exactly where Houdin predicted. Not proof, but extremely compelling evidence. The pyramid might contain the instructions for its own construction, hidden in its architecture. Think about that for a second. The building is the blueprint. Now, here's the part that rarely gets enough attention, and it has to do with precision. Because moving the blocks is impressive. Stacking them is impressive. But achieving the level of accuracy the Great Pyramid demonstrates requires something beyond brute force. It requires mathematics, surveying, and quality control on a level that most people assume didn't exist in the ancient world. The Egyptians were obsessed with precision. They invented one of the earliest systems of geometry, literally earth measurement, out of practical necessity. Every year, the Nile would flood and erase property boundaries. Surveyors, called rope stretchers, would re-establish those boundaries using ropes knotted at specific intervals to create right angles and measure distances. The 3-4-5 triangle, the foundation of the Pythagorean theorem, was being used in Egypt 1,000 years before Pythagoras was born. To level the pyramid base, they likely used water channels. Carve a shallow network of channels into the bedrock, fill them with water, mark the water level, then cut the rock to match. Water doesn't lie. It's always level. When you're working at the scale of 230 meters, water is your most reliable tool. Modern surveying equipment has confirmed the base is level to within 2.1 centimeters. That's not luck. That's systematic, obsessive craftsmanship. For alignment to true north, researchers believe they used the stars, specifically the circumpolar stars that rotate around the celestial North Pole. By tracking these stars over the course of a night and bisecting the angle of their rotation, you can find true north with remarkable precision. In 2001, Kate Spence, an Egyptologist at Cambridge, proposed that the Egyptians use the alignment of two stars, Kochab and Mizar, which would have aligned perfectly with true north around 2480 BC, exactly when the Great Pyramid was built. Astronomy as construction technology. Here's where we arrive at the uncomfortable part of the story, or at least the part that should make you uncomfortable if you've ever watched a documentary that credited aliens or Atlantis. The resistance to accepting that ancient Egyptians built the pyramids themselves is rooted in something uglier than curiosity. When 19th and early 20th century European archaeologists first studied the pyramids, many of them simply could not accept that African people, because that's what Egyptians are, had accomplished something this sophisticated without outside help. So they invented mysteries. They proposed lost civilizations. They suggested intervention from more advanced cultures, and when all else failed, modern conspiracy culture invented aliens. The underlying assumption in all of these theories is the same. The people who were actually there, who left their tools, their quarries, their worker villages, their mathematical texts, their organizational records, couldn't possibly have done this. Someone else must have. But here's the truth that the evidence makes unavoidable. The Egyptians did this. They did it with planning, labor, knowledge accumulated over generations, and a culture that valued monumental building the way ours values technology. They failed, learned, and tried again. They wrote down what they learned. They trained new generations. They refined their methods. And after decades of iteration, they got so good at building pyramids that the ones they made 4,500 years ago are still standing, still precise, still waiting for us to stop underestimating the people who built them. There's another angle to this story that doesn't get enough attention, and it has to do with why. Why go to this much effort? The standard answer is religion. The pharaoh needed a tomb to ensure his journey to the afterlife, and that's true, but it's not complete. The pyramids were also jobs programs. They were a way to unify the country during the flood season, when farming was impossible. They were proof of state power. They were training grounds for engineers and administrators who would go on to manage other projects. They were economic engines that drove demand for food, copper, timber, and labor across the entire kingdom. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was infrastructure. It was the ancient equivalent of the interstate highway system, a massive state project that employed thousands, demonstrated organizational capacity, and left behind not just a monument, but an entire system of expertise. When you build a pyramid, you're also building the civilization capable of building a pyramid. That's not mystical. That's just what large-scale projects do. They change the society that undertakes them. So when did ancient Egypt figure out how to build pyramids? The honest answer is gradually, painfully, over the course of a century of trial and error that cost unimaginable amounts of resources and left behind several very expensive failures. What we do know is this. By 2580 BC, the Egyptians had refined their methods enough to build the Great Pyramid. They did it without steel, without engines, without computers. They did it with copper, wood, rope, water, sand, and human coordination on a scale that still impresses engineers today. The mystery isn't how it was possible. The mystery is how they got this good at it this fast. There's something almost poetic about that. For all the things that separate us from the pyramid builders, the smartphones, the satellites, the machines that think, there are these thin threads of continuity that run unbroken through 4,500 years of human experience. Geometry. Planning. The refusal to accept that something is impossible just because it's hard. The pyramid builders looked at millions of tons of stone and a desert plateau and thought, we can do this. And then they did it. They didn't have our tools. They had something equally powerful. They had knowledge, organization, and the absolute certainty that humans, working together with enough care and precision, can build anything. Next time you see a photograph of the Great Pyramid, don't ask how it's possible. Ask how they got good enough to make it look easy, because that's the real story. Not the absence of technology, but the presence of expertise so refined that it's mistaken for magic. Either way, you're looking at the result of human effort. Thousands of people working in rhythm, moving stone, measuring carefully, checking their work, and building something that would outlast their civilization by millennia. You're looking at what we've always been capable of. You just have to be willing to see it.